Special guest in conversation this week. Mention his name in the office and everybody goes into raptures. He's not really coming in. He's really coming in. Is he really coming in? He's really coming in. Has he got a new book out? He has a new book out. How come he's not been on the programme before? I have no idea. He's very, very busy. He writes screenplays. He writes novels. He does fake books, which I have to come round to a little bit later on. And in the latest one, it's the twisting and the turning, and the reviews already say that William Boyd's Sweet Caress is his best in years. It's nice to see you.
Very glad to be here, Steve. Thank you.
So is it pleasing when you bring out a book, having done all the research for it, and then somebody goes, actually, we think this is your best?
Well, it is. It's better than them saying the opposite.
Yes.
But I'm quite thick-skinned about reviews and critics. I am a critic myself, and so I know how it works. It might ruin your lunch, but it doesn't ruin your dinner. A bad review. Yeah. So I'm obviously very pleased that the book's being well received.
Because you seem to work at them for ages and ages to get it just right. You seem to start off with... Somebody said to me that ask him about when he writes, because you start off with a line and then that will then turn into something else and it will build from that.
Yes, it's a slow process. I take about 2 years to figure out a book and then roughly a year to write it. But I hate the thought of abandoning a novel. So I can't start one until I know how it's going to end. So I spend years and years looking like I'm doing nothing, but actually I'm thinking furiously, researching, travelling a bit and piecing the book together, building up dossier on the individual characters, and slowly but surely sort of constructing the skeleton of the novel. And then I add the flesh, and that takes me about a year of writing. So there's a period of invention and then a period of composition, but it is a slow process. But I've never abandoned a novel as a result, because I know my destination when I start. That's the main thing.
So you don't have what I call bottom drawer novels, which are half finished, so you think, I can come back to that?
No, I mean, that's the thing. Imagine spending a year or 18 months on something, think it's not working, and I'll put it in a bottom drawer and maybe magically it will transform itself into something good. I couldn't bear that. So I think it's a preemptive move on my part to don't start until you absolutely know where you're heading and how it's going to end.
You're very disciplined then. You obviously... Have you learnt this over the years to be disciplined? Were you as disciplined when you first started?
Yeah, I think it's very clear to you once you've written your first novel. It's hard work. It takes so long to write a novel, as simple as that. And so if you haven't got stamina, it's not the career for you. So I think very quickly you learn that you have to do a lot of hard graft, and so you're self-disciplined on that score. I'm not very self-disciplined on other scores, but when it comes to writing novels, it's nose to the grindstone and no excuses. Because
it's very interesting, because the characters in your book are quite unique. They're so you, and I began to wonder when I was reading about you in your childhood, because you went to Gordonstoun, so you were a boarder.
Yeah.
Now I was a boarder as well, but that was only at prep school, and I think that makes you a particular person. I think you form your character at boarding school and prep school because you have to be fairly independent. Your family were living in Africa, so you would then presumably just go back for half term or even end of terms.
Well, holidays. Only because back in those days, flying out to Africa was a big deal. So yes. I was at a boarding school because I went to primary school in Africa. So my first 9 years of education were out there. But then I was sent back, like all colonial kids in those days, to boarding school. And I spent 9.5 years at boarding school in the north of Scotland. And I calculated in those 9.5 years, I saw my parents for 3 of them. So you're absolutely right. You're on your own. Yeah. And as you know, a boarding school is a kind of hothouse. And if you can't fend for yourself, you'll very quickly become a kind of victim. So it does shape you, but it also can shape you in bad ways as well. Yes, yes. I think you can be incredibly independent, but in other ways incredibly naive and innocent. And so I think a single-sex boarding school is not the ideal education for a young boy or a young girl. But there's no doubt that the process of going through this closed society of the school does make you rely on yourself very quickly.
Yes, I think my mother always said, she said, I wish we'd never sent you to boarding school. Yeah. And I think it was a case of you, because you grew up to be independent, they were so far away that I only went home at the end of term. So on your exeats and your half terms, you got farmed out to other people. And so but you did learn to. I was promised all sorts of things when I went there. Oh, you'll have cocoa before bed and an apple and all this kind of rubbish. You never got any of that at all.
No, they're quite severe, stern institutions.
They absolutely are. But you're in with all these other. How old were you when you went to Gordonstoun?
9 years old.
So I was 9.
Yes,
That's your little boy.
He's a little kid.
Kids.
And my mother was in tears as she waved me off at the
similar experience.
And then she didn't see me for another 3 months.
Yeah.
And then then the other thing is when you come home, you want to be on your best behaviour. You want to have a nice time. And so in a way, your parents sort of miss your growing up because it's not really real when you come back in the holidays. And so there's a great chunk of your adolescence which is lived apart from your family. Not a good thing either, I think.
No,
but,
I mean, my mother, exactly the same as yours. My mother used to cry when my father would get the car out to take me back to school. And you'd think, why are you crying? Because I had my tuck box, you had your bits and pieces. Your parents almost became sort of a little bit surplus to your requirements.
Yes, exactly.
Even though the RAF were paying for my education, which was quite nice. Yeah. It was the fact that you went to school, you had your friends at school. And I went back there a short while ago just to remind myself of what it looked like, and it appears much smaller.
Yes, that's always the way, yes.
At the time, it looked enormous, and I can remember cold showers and rugby and freezing cold fingers trying to do the buttons of your shirt up. A little thing because you're a little child.
Yes, yeah, it's true. I mean, we also Gordonstoun was quite a self-confessedly tough school.
Yes.
And we used to have, morning runs and cold showers.
Yes.
But we also had to do all the housework. So I'm sweeping corridors and polishing lino, at the age of 10. Good for the soul, perhaps, but it is a kind of penal servitude in a way.
It is,
and expensive penal servitude. But
yes, you're paying for the privilege.
Exactly. So they're very strange institutions. There's no getting away from it, and it's very much part of a certain level of British life as well. It's very, very influential. It's conditioned all sorts of aspects of British life. Even people who haven't been to boarding school. You think of something like Harry Potter. It's about a boarding school.
Yes, that's all. Yes.
So,
albeit a quite nice one.
Yes, exactly. But there you are. It's part of our culture, I suppose.
Did it give you a different relationship with your parents? Did they encourage writing? I mean, presumably you must have had at an early age a pretty furtive imagination.
Well, I think I did, but I think I don't come from a family of writers. Or my mother had 2 sisters who were artists, but I think it was something in me. I think my father was always trying to sort of brainwash me, get a proper job, save 1/6 of your income, make sure there's a pension. And I just ignored him completely. And so I think there was something in me that I thought, no, I'm not cut out for a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday life. I have to, and I think I wanted, in a very, very unformed way, to be an artist of some kind. And live the life of an artist, whatever that was, something I'd seen in the movies or
bohemian existence.
Yeah, that's right, lots of drinking and, travel abroad and things like that.
But you do that now. Wait a minute. That's what a lot of your characters drink. Yes. You do the travelling, so you've incorporated.
Yes, exactly. So I think I quite around about 17 or 18, I thought, no, I want to be a painter initially, and that then my father said, forget that one. You're not going to art school. So then I thought, well, I'll be a writer. I'll be a novelist. But I had no idea how to set about being a novelist. So I had to educate myself, and it took a while, but. I'm still here.
You are, of course, and the painting bit came in because in Nat Tate,
yes, exactly.
The paintings are yours.
Yes,
they're your paintings. I should explain for those people who don't know. This was sort of a con. This was a book that William wrote about Nat Tate, who was this artist who people thought was real, but of course it was a total figment of your imagination. Is it true that on the launch people did actually say, of course I knew him quite well?
Yes, it was. I mean, it was an elaborate hoax, that's what it was, and it was very carefully constructed, but it didn't quite go according to plan. I wanted it to be a very slow burn. That in 2 months after the book came out, somebody would say, this is a load of nonsense, he never existed, this American painter. But my publisher was David Bowie, and he was obviously in on the hoax, and anything associated with Bowie, attracts enormous attention.
Yes.
So the launch party was in New York, in the studio of Jeff Koons, very famous artist.
He married an Italian porn star, didn't he?
Cicciolina.
That's right.
And
then they started making all sorts of art.
I know. And then. So, Bowie and Jeff Koons, we had an amazing glittering crowd there, and Bowie read out extracts from Nat Tate, not saying anything. And he wrote the blurb of the book, in fact, where he said he owns the Nat Tate. So people were just buying it. And the book is very plausible. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Oh, yes. It's very plausible. Yes, of course.
Coffee table book with full of illustrations and photographs and acknowledgements and footnotes and all that sort of thing. And there was a British journalist who was in on the hoax, and he was wandering around asking people questions about Nat Tate. And of course, they were saying, yes, it was so sad the way he died. And yeah, I think I saw a show of his once and things like that. And we were going to do exactly the same thing in London. And we had another big party set up in London. But the journalist broke the hoax before it happened. So, but anyway, it goes on and on and on. It's just been published and translated into Spanish.
Fantastic.
So it's 1998, and here we are in 2015, yes. And it's still rumbling on.
I love it. Actually, I should just point out quickly for those people who don't know, Jeff Koons made his name, and he's still going in other people making his art, and then him putting his name on it.
Yes, he's got a factory. He
has a factory,
and he makes these kind of pop art, balloon sculptures,
yes.
20 feet high, and he's phenomenally wealthy.
Yes, hugely wealthy.
He's a bit like a modern Andy Warhol in a way. He just churns it out, yes. and signs it.
And sells for huge amount, and all he does is sign it. And yeah, it's unbelievable. Listen, very quick break. More from William Boyd and Sweet Caress after this. Special guest in conversation. I've so looked forward to having a talk to him, because ever since I heard about his early childhood and his boarding school experiences and how he got into writing, I thought, I've got a lot in common with this man. The difference is I can't write for toffee. I can't write. I think it's a great gift to have, to be able to take something in your mind and actually put it down on paper and make it believable. And not just once, but twice and 3 times, and so it goes on. And this career is huge. I mean, it's enormous for you, William Boyd, isn't it? I mean, the screenwriting came in. I mean, everything is just, it's a perfect existence.
Well, it may look like that from the outside. I do have my share of frustrations like everybody else, but no, I've always wanted to be a novelist, and I wanted the novel writing to open the doors to writing films, writing television, and now I'm writing plays as well. So I've always been quite a diverse writer. I write a lot of journalism, I write introductions to books and things like that. So I think it's a very, very British tradition in the writing fraternity that if you're a British novelist, you do a lot of writing. Whereas if you're a French novelist or an American novelist, you can take 10 years between books. But not here. So I do work hard in between novels. So I take my novels come out every 3 years or so. But in between, I'm keeping busy.
So do you write to be more successful than the last time, or are you purely writing just now? Because I'm assuming, I spoke to Jeffrey Archer the other week, and he said I don't need to earn the money anymore. He said I've got the money, which is very pleasing. He said, so I'm writing for pleasure. He said that's what I do it for. He said I'm not writing to try and sell books. He said it's nice when they sell, but he said I'm writing purely for myself.
Well, he's a very lucky author, because I don't think that's remotely typical. I think I'm writing to keep the show on the road, basically. Right. And I think the other thing, as you get older and as your career gets longer, this is my 14th novel, and they're all available in bookshops in Germany, in America, Spain, France. And so actually the challenge is now, how do I keep that status quo? And so I'm thinking when a new novel comes out, my first novel was published in 1981. You can still go out and buy it in any bookshop, and I think that for me is the great thing, that all my novels are available, whereas it's not true for masses of writers that 2 or 3 of them are available, the other ones are out of print. And so for me the challenge now is, how do I keep all those books in print? And in a way what happens is that each new book kind of reinvigorates the backlist, and in a way that's what I look to happen, rather than thinking about advances or good reviews or prizes or whatever. It's really just like, this will help keep the show on the road.
Is that interesting? I thought you would be worrying about that, but you're right. I mean, you're in a very unique position with all of your books still available, whereas a lot of artists and writers, they have their book out, then it disappears, and then you might find it in a charity shop or something like that.
No, I have an elderly writer friend who's in his 80s. I won't name him, but he's written 20 novels, and I think maybe 1 or 2 of them are available. And of course, it's sort of embittering in a way, because they're good novels, but somehow the readership for them has gone, and as soon as the readership drops below 5,000 copies a year, publishers will think, well, it's not worth printing this.
Yes, you're right.
And so his oeuvre is not available unless you go to a second-hand bookshop or a library.
So, and of course nowadays it isn't just, whereas my father used to walk up and down the Charing Cross Road to buy books, he would, he loved the feel of books, he loved the smell of books, so we had loads of books at home, we read all sorts of books. Nowadays with the internet and Kindles and everything else, your book's available in all sorts of, you don't actually physically need to buy a book.
Yes, that's true. The great thing is that reading hasn't gone out of fashion.
Thank God.
And it's interesting. Apparently, people who have Kindles buy 4 times as many books as your ordinary old-fashioned book buyer. So there's a sense in which readers have never gone away, and it may even be increasing, but the way they read is changing slightly.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of feedback from your readers?
Yes, I do. And certain books seem to prompt a continual flow of letters. My novel, Any Human Heart, is the classic example. I had 3 times as many letters about that book than any of the other books, and I get letters about them all, and I always reply as well. I think.
Do you?
Yes. If somebody's might just postcard, thank you very much for writing, but I just think if somebody's taken the trouble to sit down and write you a letter about your book, then you owe them
You're like Barbara Cartland.
A word of thanks.
If you wrote to Barbara Cartland and said, I read your last book, she would send you a card back signed, going, thank you so much. And I used to think, this is great, but she wasn't selling anything at all. Yes. I think towards the end of her life, but I think she was more overhyped than anything.
Yes.
And so the books were selling in small quantities.
Well, I don't get hundreds of letters a week.
Well, quite impressed.
But I do get regular flow of letters, and from all around the world and from all sorts of different people, and so I think I always acknowledge and say thank you very much. But so there is a lot of feedback and continuing feedback, and when if one of the books is adapted for a film or for television, then that kind of stimulates interest in it again, and yes. People write about the film adaptation, and I think it's great, it's because you're kind of an anonymous figure as a novelist. People may know your name, yes. But you wander freely around the world, and yes. Very rarely are you recognized. So yes. You have the best of all possible worlds in that sense. So when somebody actually writes to you, they almost apologize for it.
I'm so sorry to write.
Yes, but it's very nice to get that feedback, and it's very important. But of course, now you meet your readers at readings and at literary festivals in a way that never existed for novelists.
And you have some of those coming up. I know you're going to be doing some chats to people where you go out and you then do a talk for 30 minutes on presumably Sweet Caress at the moment, and then people ask you questions.
Then you sign books afterwards. But you flash back 30 years or so, or but longer. Novelists like Graham Greene probably never met his readers because there were no such events unless they were his friends. So there's a sense in which today's novelists really have a sense of who's reading their books, which is quite unusual.
Yes, you're right. I think we have more literary festivals now than we've ever had.
Oh, yeah.
I speak to a lot of authors and they say, well, I'm doing this festival and that festival. And you think, what a great opportunity. A, it can sell some books. Secondly, you can get out there and talk to people and they can talk to you.
I think there's one literary festival a week in this country, actually.
Yes, it is.
And now it's global. You can go to Sri Lanka, Rio de Janeiro. It's an international...
And there are festivals out there as well.
Yeah, massive festival. This is quite extraordinary. You could travel the world for a year.
You do travel the world. You do travel the world. When it came to the screenplays, when you first got invited to a screenplay, how different is the writing for a screenplay than from a novel?
It's very different. And in fact, I think it's almost more of a craft, a sort of specialist craft than an art, because it's a collaboration for starters. But the other thing that strikes me, having done both, is this sounds very banal, but film is photography, and everything is seen through the lens of a camera. So everything is very objective, and novels are effortlessly subjective. So immediately you shift to the world of cinema. You can't do 75% of the things you can do in a novel, and also it's very expensive.
Yes. Do you have to think of cost as you're going through that?
If you put 10,000 troops pour over, of course you can do that on computer nowadays. But there's all sorts of it's a world of constraints and parameters and compromises, whereas the novel is a world of total freedom and liberty. So the writing in the world of cinema is shaped by the industrial process of making films, and it's very significant that the two art forms are quite different, in my opinion.
Then there was the Bond book.
Oh yes.
So we did Bond, and you've worked with 3 of the Bonds anyway, haven't you?
Yes, there's obviously a sort of Bond thing going on in my life, because I by sheer chance, I worked with Sean Connery. He was in a film based on my first novel, and I got to know him. I wrote the scripts, and then I worked with Pierce Brosnan, which I wrote a film wasn't based on one of my novels, and got to know him. And then I directed a film, which I wrote and directed, called The Trench, which is a World War I movie. And we cast a little-known actor in it called Daniel Craig.
He'll never amount to anything.
Exactly. Whatever happened to him?
Whatever happened to him? Where did he go?
Yeah, but the extraordinary thing about The Trench is that 6 or 7 of these young unknown actors are now incredibly famous. Ben Whishaw was his very first film. Of course, now he's working with Daniel Craig in the Bond.
Yes.
They owe it all to me. But,
yes, exactly. I was the person.
So there was a curious. That was a curious coincidence. And then I put Ian Fleming in one of my novels as a character. And then the Fleming family asked me to write a James Bond novel. And I thought, I'm obviously destined to do this. So,
this is it.
And it was fun. And I really enjoyed it. And I took it very seriously. Yes, Solo it's called. And I took it very seriously. And it's steeped in Bondiana. And it was a very nice job to be asked to do.
So you finished Sweet Caress, presumably some time ago.
Yeah, I handed it in last November.
Right, so we're already thinking about the next book.
Yeah,
how far down the line are you?
I know what it's going to be, and it's fermenting away, and I know I'm going to have to do a bit of travelling, and I'm starting to buy books to research it, but I haven't figured out the end yet.
How many books do you buy to research something? You must have hundreds and thousands.
I sort of like to accumulate a little library of books I need for the book I'm going to. So sometimes it can be 20 books, but in the case of long books like Sweet Caress or Any Human Heart, I might buy 250.
Good God, really?
I buy them online very cheaply, but I stack them up on the floor of my study, and so I can grab one if I need it. And it's a kind of reassurance in a way, like I have everything to hand, and I've got the computer, I've got the internet. Yeah. But I just am still an old-fashioned pre-computer writer, so I like to be able to, writing about Berlin in the 1920s, I bought an old guidebook for Berlin in the 1920s, so I can see how you can get from A to F, or whether the U-Bahn went past that street or whatever. So
and you went to Vienna?
I went to Vienna, yes.
I love Vienna. Yeah, I always love it whenever you land. They say you're arriving at Schwekat, set your watch back 100 years. Right. Because it doesn't change at all in Vienna. The same shops are still there, everything.
You feel you could bump into Mozart.
Yes. Well, I said to you before we started, I said there is a character in Sweet Caress called Hannelore Hahn, and I said I worked with a Hannelore Hahn at the ORF in Vienna.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe I've seen a name of somebody I know.
Well, it must happen, it's because I do give my characters slightly unusual names.
Yes, but they're not made up names. You always say to somebody, look through the phone book. You want to see unusual names?
No, exactly. It's quite extraordinary how strangely people are named. But I think if you give a character just a slightly unusual name, that character's already living. So it's a kind of christening process, which I take great care over. But Hannelore Hahn, I thought, there's no Hannelore Hahns out there, but there you go.
There are now. there are now. William, thank you so much for your time. I'm very, very grateful. I've always wanted to meet you. And
it's a pleasure.
Haven't disappointed at all. You're even more interesting than I thought you were going to be in the first place. Sweet Caress is out now. William Boyd, thank you.
Thank you very much.
God gave me one strange gift to tell a story. And it just never stops. I assume I get up each day and I think it'll stop today, it'll stop. It can't go on. It can't. And every single day something comes up. I'm very